In the beginning, John was much more interested than Yoko. In fact, one evening, John and Yoko invited Prabhupada over to listen to a song that he had just recorded. This is just after his 29th birthday. And he made a song called Cold Turkey. And of course, the significance of that song was that he was actually having withdrawal symptoms coming off heroin because, and I saw this myself, he was, himself and his wife were shooting up heroin constantly while we were there. And that's why Yoko Ono had so many miscarriages, because she was also really anxious to have a child by John Lennon. And I had to clean up an office one time in the main house, and when I moved a filing cabinet, I came across all these, hypodermic needles. And syringes were just lying around. Also, they had some very unsavory characters living at their place. They had someone called Alexander Trocky, and he was a Scotsman, but he had moved to New York and he'd written a book about his visions on heroin. And also William Burroughs was invited, and William Burroughs wrote a book called The Soft Machine. He was living in North Africa. So they were really dabbling a lot in that drug culture, looking for identity or something. They were looking for something. And that's why we were there too. And of course, they had made a record called John and Yoko Forever, because Yoko's whole consciousness was fixed that she wanted some or another to live with John forever, for eternity. And of course, when Yoko asked this question of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, "This is impossible," said at death, immediately, "You are separated," then she lost all interest. It was like a private invitation. There was Srila Prabhupada and his secretary, his servant, Purushottam. But Trivikram and myself knew about this meeting. And we also knew the layout of the house, because we'd also been stripping paint from the walls, the wooden boards, because it was all beautiful oak paneling in the main living room. And there was French windows leading out into the garden. So what we did was, without Prabhupada's knowing, without John Lennon's knowing, we had, in the dark, gone over to the French windows, and although the curtains were drawn, they weren't completely closed. There was like a little slit and we could see into the room. And also, by the French windows, John Lennon had put up all his recording equipment. There was an Ampex machine, because he wanted Prabhupada to hear the master tape, the master recording of this song. And Prabhupada had also been recording. He had been recording some bhajans, and these were accompanied by harmonium and tampura. So we saw the scene through the slit in the curtains, that Prabhupada came into that room, and he was invited to sit down in a very large, comfortable sofa along with Purushottam, which was at the other end of the room. And Yoko was sitting on a chair next to Prabhupada, and then John said, "So I've made this recording, I'd like you to hear it." And he came over to where the equipment was, and he started playing around with the knobs and dials. And it started to move, but then all of a sudden, he couldn't get it to work. There was no sound coming out. The tape was moving, but there was no sound coming out. And we could, because we were facing him, and he was facing us, although he couldn't see us, because we were in pitch dark, and he was in this, in this bright room. We could see he was really getting frustrated, because there was no sound coming out of his equipment. And after a minute or so, Prabhupada realized he was having difficulty, and he said, so it seems you're having trouble. But I have also done some recording, and I brought my tape recording machine, and that's working. It's a little Euro portable. And he told Purushottam to start it up, and so instead of Prabhupada having to hear this horrific song, I don't know if you've heard this song, it's a horrific song. He was spared that song, and he was able to play his music to John Lennon. So John had to retire from his equipment and sit down near Yoko Ono and listen. And then shortly after that, after a few minutes conversation, Prabhupada said, so now I have to go back. I have some translation work to do. And then he had left the room. And then as he was coming round, we jumped out of the bushes and paid our obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada rubbed us on our backs as we were paying our obeisances. And he went, Jai, he said, so, you saw?
There was one particular morning walk when very few of us were actually with Prabhupada. It was here at Bhaktivedanta Manor. And there were about 5 of us. And for the first third or so of the walk, Prabhupada didn't speak. He was just chanting on his japa. And then he reached the top of the road where the road turns off towards the right, just past Round Bush. And Prabhupada asked us a few questions. He said, he first of all started explaining how the living entities, they reflect the mystic powers that Krishna has. Krishna is full of mystic powers, but the living entities, they also have mystic powers. Just like the frog. Prabhupada said, the frog has yogic powers. You bury him in the ground, he will not die. I was walking next to Prabhupada. I said, but Prabhupada, the frog, he breathes through his skin. Prabhupada said, no, he has yogic powers. It's interesting. Since then, I've read of frogs and toads buried in solid stone for goodness knows how many tens of thousands, perhaps even millions of years. A quarryman cracking open a stone and a live frog or a live toad comes out. So they're actually having mystic powers to be buried for so long.
I remember one story, and I just read it confirmed in Harisori's third part of his diary. There I organized the Janmashtami, and I think it was the first time that we'd arranged to have paying for some prasadam. And, you know, generally we had a big booth and there would be prasadam distributed everywhere. But this one year I thought, well, why not make some little extra prasadam special and then charge somebody who doesn't want to take, you know, the basic rice chapati and sabji. They may want some pizzas or something, chips or something different. And we're not able to serve prasadam the whole time, so we'll keep... So anyhow, I made this arrangement for a little, or somebody did, but I was president, so I was feeling responsible that it... And later on I was up in Prabhupada's room and there was darshan, kirtan, and at the end, so Prabhupada said, any questions? And one guest quite strongly began to criticize and complain that why you are selling prasadam? Prasadam is prasadam, it should be given away. So my heart started pounding, I panicked, you know, I'm standing at the back. And Prabhupada is looking, and he looks around, and he said, actually, and then Prabhupada said to him, I think Harisori's got the exact word for word, but basically Prabhupada said, if we don't charge you, then you'll never give anything. So I felt completely vindicated that it was okay to, you know, to sell some prasadam at the temple. In Harisori's book, Prabhupada says something that actually you are meant to give to support, but you don't give, therefore we charge you something. Otherwise you'll never give anything. So that was quite, he had to be quiet then after that. But he was, I remember the Indian gentleman, he was a particularly complaining type. He was always there though, he always used to come regularly. So I thought I was a little nervous in case Prabhupada took issue with me that we were selling prasadam. But he accepted that that was okay.
One time we were going past Buckingham Palace. So we were very proud at that time that one boy had joined who was part of the Queen's Guards. You know, the guys who wear the big furry hats. So as we were passing the palace, we were in a taxi with Prabhupada. So we looked over and we said, Prabhupada, one of the Queen's personal guards has joined. And then Prabhupada said, oh, so what about the Queen?